Delight to be with you all again here this Sunday morning. Just want to say what a joy to hear the choir sing that rendition. I've never heard that arrangement before, and I have to get a copy of that. It's beautiful. I'd like to take all of the choir members to sing it again, too. It's also a delight to be here with Pastor Short to hear his strong voice again after a long ordeal that he's gone through, and he and Jean. And it's so delightful that he is the recipient of such great blessings of our God. May God's grace be with you and with me and with all of us as we see Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration this day in all of his glory. And yet there are so often times in our life when maybe we don't see the glory of our God. I'm sure many of you saw images on television after the earthquake in Haiti. But I do want to say, before I talk about the earthquake a little bit, there was no damage to any of the structures in the village supported by St. Andrew and the whole southern tip. If you're familiar a little bit, this is Port-au-Prince right there, and this is that whole section here where there is development along the coast, and there was no damage there at all. In fact, near Cité Soleil, the heart of Port-au-Prince, we have bulldozed a lot of the slum area, not nearly enough, and Food for the Poor has put in about 50 new homes, and Habitat has put in some more homes. And of all those homes, right near the beach in the slum areas, one home was totally demolished, and that's all. All the other homes stood firm. We did have some damages in some of our orphanages, and 2 children lost their lives. We also, as you know, there were college students from Lynn University on a Food for the Poor project, and they were in the Montana Hotel. I know Pastor Short has been in the Montana Hotel. I've been there many times, and that's the hotel that was totally demolished. And now we have discovered and identified all of the students and one of the faculty members. There's 1 student still missing and 1 faculty member. So of the 14, 12 have been identified. And 6, of course, were saved. They were students that were out by the pool. The others were in getting ready for dinner. Probably some of the images you saw, you may have seen this image in Haiti, downtown Port-au-Prince, where there's some rather large fires set to destroy some of the debris. And there's so many grotesque pictures I could share, but I'm not going to do that. But some of those fires were human crematoria to dispose of the bodies that were lying around the side of the roads. And one picture that may have caught your attention was a lady who had a Bible in her hand, and she threw the Bible into the fire and screamed out, "And where was our God?" A very dramatic picture. And yet every pastor has heard those words, "And where was my God?" when my baby died. As a chaplain with the Marine Corps, a Navy chaplain during Vietnam, I buried over 200 young men, not one of whom had seen their 25th birthday. And I heard that question many times. And where was God when my son lost his life? Every pastor hears this all the time in his ministry. Car accident, inebriated driver, wipes out a family home from church, and where was God? That's a question of anger. And there's tremendous anger anytime there is a tragedy. And it's valid anger. And part of the answer to that question, where was my God, is with another question. Where was God on Good Friday? When his own son cried out, "My God, have you forsaken me?" Where was God? In that moment when Jesus himself asked the question. Where God was redeeming the world. And if we can maybe get a better insight into Paul's thinking when he says, all of creation moans and groans and travails together. This is a fallen world. And we are part of this world. We don't possess it. We don't control it. But Paul uses that imagery of creation moaning and groaning and travail together. Like a woman about ready to give birth to a child, there may be complications. There will be pain. But when that child is born, the pain is forgotten. And there is great rejoicing, for a new birth has come into life. A child has been born. We know the world is in a continual process of renewal and creation. It is still winter. Soon it will be spring, and the trees will bud again, and the flowers. And then there is the harvest, and then there is the rejuvenation of the winter. I live in South Florida, have for many years. I've gone through many hurricanes. I've been involved with Lake Worth as an interim pastor some years ago, and the entire church was destroyed in a hurricane. You know, about 4 months later, after a service, the new pastor I had installed asked if I would preach on January 1st with a vision for tomorrow. And after the service, a lady came to me. She's an old lady, and that's important because she had been baptized in that church. She had 5 children baptized in their church. She had 3 children married in that church. If anybody had cause for anger, my beloved church is gone. And she shook my hand after I had a service in the gymnasium. And she said, Pastor Volz, isn't this a beautiful day? So why do you say that? She said, it's so beautiful. The Lord had to destroy all of our idols before we discovered the church again, as they worshiped outside on Christmas Eve on the slab. What insight! The church was not the building. The church is not the school. It's not the gym. It's not the stained glass windows. It's not the pipework. All rubble. But the church is the people. The people who embraced each other in love and hope and dreams. Where is God in a hurricane? Each one of the disasters we call disasters is part of God's creation and has a function. Hurricane takes the heat out of the tropics. The forest fires purify the undergrowth. Even the blizzards bring moisture to the parched earth. It's a matter of how we perceive where we fit into the scheme of things. We are not immune from the events of the world. We are all part of it. And what's God's part? He brings redemption. He himself, as I used to say at a military funeral, sometimes packed with thousands of people, where's God? I say, God's sitting in the front row, crying. He's crying because of the brokenness of the world. And he's restoring it. He's redeeming it. And that's why there's a cross. And that's why there's rebirth. And that's why there's rejuvenation. Oh, the suffering today is immense. The suffering is immense. It's beyond description of what it's like to realize that over 200,000 already have been buried and identified. To see human beings being bulldozed into holes by the 10s and 20s and 50s. And they've already identified well over 200,000. It may be up to 500,000 people were killed in a matter of a few minutes. There has never been any kind of destruction like this in the Western Hemisphere since the beginning of time that we've counted time. There have been other events where millions have lost their lives, but not in the Western Hemisphere, not in our area. And the suffering is unimaginable. First of all, let your mind simply wander if you're buried under rubbles of tons of steel and of concrete, and you know you're going to die, and you will. And they have brought people out realizing they have done some of their own amputations. The suffering of knowing most of my children, or all of them, are dead. It's hard to fathom that kind of pain. The cathedral, which is down kitty corner from the state capitol and the palace, I've been in that cathedral on numerous occasions. One of our our leaders just came back, and I met with him. He had a meeting with us on Thursday, 2 days ago. He was there from the day after the earthquake until just last Tuesday. He's the executive director of Food for the Poor. A man of great talent, a great ability, and great insight and great love. He said, I went with one of our photographers, and he showed us a picture of the rubble of the cathedral, where many people had learned to know of their God. But in the corner was a statue that had fallen down, a statue of Jesus. And it was a rather large wooden statue, maybe about as tall as the wall here. And it was in good shape from the head and the torso, but the arms were broken off and the legs were broken off. And it was lying on a rubble in a corner. And Angel, who was speaking, said, I looked at them and I wept. It's as though Jesus had come to endure the suffering with others. He too had no arms and legs. And the generation of amputees in Haiti will be legion, the many children that had to lose an arm or a leg or all four. And some of them, of course, have since expired because the early amputations with hacksaws, no disinfectant. Only disinfectant the doctors could find would be vodka. And some were rusty. And if you know a little bit about the medicine, you know when there's an amputation, it has to be, the dressing has to be changed a couple times a day or at least once a day to fight against infection. Where if infection sets in quickly, there is no hope. But that's where Jesus is found. Jesus is suffering as he always had with his creation. He's suffering because of sin and evil and death. And yet as you look across the square, you see there's the palace. The palace in rubble. Been in that palace numerous times. And there's so many symbolic actions. It's as though in divine justice, the palace was destroyed as an act of showing that corruption in government eventually destroys a people. And for at least 100 years, the history of Haiti is one of great sadness. With the leaders of Duvalier, Baby Doc, Senior Doc, Aristide, people have said, why haven't they used their wealth, their resources? Even the Americans have given them great assistance in 1912. But that's not really true, because the Americans often gave money to the leaders, as we are prone to do so often through our State Department, and the leaders put the money in their pocket. They are corrupt. And when we think of governments as being corrupt, we can think of Port-au-Prince, we can think of El Salvador, but we can't overlook Washington, where there is corruption wherever there is wealth to be obtained. We are not without sin, for we are all part of a dying world of people. It's appointed a man wants to live, and then it comes a time to die. You see, here we turn our thoughts for a moment to Job. Very succinctly, if you remember Job, there were three friends. Job was suffering. And the friends tried to explain why you're suffering, Job. One friend said, this is because someplace in your past you have sinned, and you're being punished for your sins. It's like some people asked Jesus once. There was a Tower of Siloam outside of Jerusalem. It had fallen down, and some innocent people were killed, and people said, why were those people killed? Was it because of their sin? Jesus said, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with it. Job told his friends, he says, no, I don't believe your rationale. But be careful sometimes when we quote Job, simply take it at face value. You've got to understand who's talking. It's a drama. It's like a play. And you can easily misquote Job. Because Job is saying, I don't believe that I'm being punished for my sins this way. God doesn't do that. The second speaker said, you're being punished for your sins. because God is trying to teach you a lesson. And Job basically said, that's nonsense. And the third speaker said, God is making you strong. And he's showing his power and strength in your life. Job says, you know, all three of you guys don't know what you're talking about. You're rationalizing everything. I don't know. But I do know that I live in a world where I know that my Redeemer lives. And though after this life my eyes will see God and I will see him forever. And that's the affirmation of trust. It's not rationalism. It's trying to understand. Because there are many things I don't understand. But Job says, there is one thing I do. I know my Redeemer lives. And that he is going to bring me to the face of God. And that's faith. And so out of that suffering, we see the symbols of power being squashed. And we see the symbols of evil being squashed, as invariably they are. And on top of that, we now begin to deal with something new in Haiti. It's a flood. Haiti is enduring a flood. It's a flood of God's goodness. It's a flood of God's mercy. To see primarily the people of God coming together. Because we understand, to use the imagery of St. Paul, that we are one body in Christ. And when one member suffers, we all suffer. When one member rejoices, we all rejoice. If one person in a family is sick, the whole family suffers. If there are people in a church who suffer, we suffer with them. And our brothers and sisters in Haiti are part of our family. And to see the people of God coming from around the world to discover Haiti, a nation that has been neglected, ignored, and abused. It has been abused by the nations, including our own. It has been abused by basically the world. Just one example is when we in our country elected not to buy sugar from Haiti because the sugar farmers in the Everglades, my neighbors, wanted to have high price supports. And so Haiti had no place to sell their sugar until they sold it to a young revolutionary in Cuba by the name of Castro. But Cuba grows its own sugar. So why did they want to buy our sugar? Because they were selling it to the Russians. So our response, of course, was a blockade. We wouldn't let any ships go in or out of Haiti. But in 1787, when the slaves were freed by the French, 1787, it was a battalion of Haitians who came to participate in the siege of Savannah, so that Savannah could not be used as a headquarters for the British. To think in terms of Haitians helping the American Revolution, working, fighting with George Washington. They have a phenomenal history. But the history of Haiti is one of hope. It is one of survival. It is one of faith. The Haitian people are those who have seen the Transfiguration and see it for themselves. For hundreds of years, it's a nation that has had moments of great prosperity, called the gem of the Caribbean. And then there have been many times when it has become the object of scorn and ridicule. And to see that flood coming together, our government, our military, was so critical to restore order. The USN ship Comfort, I know the Comfort rather well. We have two sister ships that are hospital ships in the U.S. Navy. One is called the Comfort, and that's for the Atlantic. and the other is called the Hope for the Pacific. And years ago, I was the chaplain who commissioned the Hope in San Diego Harbor. So I know the ships well. 1,000 beds that now are the ICU. And they are treating so many people, they were running out of oxygen. Food for the Poor last Tuesday was able to get a whole shipment of oxygen to the USN Hope. We are all working together, whether it's the Billy Graham Shepherd's Purse, World Vision, Habitat. And the biggest players in Haiti are the church-related, the gospel-related groups. You don't hear much about that for a variety of reasons. That's fine. We don't do anything we do for publicity. We've been in fact, tomorrow is the 28th birthday of the organization of Food for the Poor. And we've been in Haiti for 25 years. Before the rumble had even stopped, we have a huge warehouse in Haiti. All the walls fell down, the roof collapsed, but none of the merchandise inside was damaged. And we were feeding already 10,000 people 2 days after, and now we're back up to 30,000 people a day. And working to help reestablish an order in the society. The work of the Carl Vinson, an aircraft carrier that's flying helicopters, was indispensable. But we were able, and that's one of the key factors, how do you get the stuff to the people? That's so hard. And those helicopters are like angels, because you can't drive trucks, you can't drive vehicles many places around about a 50-mile radius, but you could do helicopter drops, and that's what we were doing. We were staging in Dominican Republic. We even staged as far away as Jamaica to bring food to the people. One of the sad things that's beginning to happen, though, but it's inevitable, is this was a big story for about a month. And you don't see much about it. Our news, we are soundbite-oriented people. But the real tragedy of Haiti is just beginning. It's going to take many years to reestablish a culture and a life. It's going to take many, many years for some of the children to become healthy again. And the organizations, some of them will be leaving soon. They've done the initial relief. We stay with the program forever, as long as we can. And Haiti is one of our biggest ministries, and one reason for it is because our leadership, our people of God, realize the Haitian people, how could I describe them? They are wonderful people. They are kind. They are gracious. When I say that to some people, say, yeah, but I see them looting. They're not looting like New Orleans. They're not looting plasma television sets. They're not looting radios, taking tires off cars. No. If there's a mother and a father, they've lost 3 or 4 children, and other children are starving, they will do what they have to do to get water if they can. One of the things that we are not encouraging right now is people who want to go to help. And that's understandable around the world, but the only people we want to come to help right now are people trained in disaster relief, or people that have a skill, like the medical skills. Because what happens with some of the volunteers who have come, they take water, they take resources. There's no place for them to stay. The ABC News channel in Miami, which is the place many of the feeds came from, they have a crew. They had a crew down there last week. I'm so proud. I wrote them a letter, said, you people are wonderful. You know, sometimes you have the anchor men, anchor ladies, their hair is perfectly coiffed, and they look just so precise. And they all went down there. There were about 10 of them on this team, cameramen. They were totally self-sufficient. They brought their own food, their own water. They slept in the streets, or some of them had access to 1 or 2 of the tents. And they didn't drain any resources. But there are those who would come to help. Now, by God's grace, we were able to get 25,000 tents from the government of Lebanon. We do fishing villages and tilapia ponds. Tilapia ponds, our guides there are the Taiwanese government. They're the ones that have helped us develop now 500 tilapia ponds. And that whole southern ring of Haiti, we're building tilapia ponds for food. We planted a lot of fruit trees there too, even around the village that you folks have built. I can't describe how important it is. We are all pragmatists. We want to know, is it effective? But you can't describe what it does to save human lives. It's not just comfort. It's to saving human lives. But the Taiwanese government sent us, I don't know how many tons, but many tons of rice. The Chinese government sent us rice, getting rice and beans from China. And they're doing this all free of charge. One of your members observed some of this on a cruise. It costs about $8,000 to ship one container. A container is 80 feet. It's an 18-wheeler is what it is. A 40-foot is a half of an 18-wheeler. We have over 500 containers in country right now, and we have about 300 in transit, either from Jamaica or from some of them coming from Dominican Republic. $8,000 to ship a container. It hasn't cost Food for the Poor a dime because of our relationship with others. The cruise ships are taking all of our stuff. They might take, one cruise ship will take 50, one might take 75. And even though some people in the press have been critical of the cruise ships functioning and say, my goodness, how nearsighted are you? Cruise ships bring money to a country. The economy needs money. They need the supplies. The cruise ships are doing it free of charge, saving absolutely millions of dollars. There is hope. Haitian people have always had hope. And it's in that spirit that we lift up our eyes, and they do lift them up and see the transfigured Jesus. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. The good brother Jim told the children, where do you see God? I see God all over Haiti. I see God rejuvenating the lives of healthy people, as it has my life. My life changed after I began to see poverty in the world, whether it was in Haiti or in Central America. My whole life took a different vision. And that's after 50 years of ministry. You can see a world that I never realized was out there. And to see that God does work through people. We are his hands. We are his feet. That statue of Christ, suffering with the poor. But a reminder to all of us, Christ is wounded on the cross. But he tells you and to me to be his Christ. When he says, go into the world, preach and teach and baptize, and that's the mandate. Go and share the good news. I want to say one thing about the desperation, about what we might perceive as hopelessness. If a list is, and it has been by the United Nations, the countries of the world with their suicide rates, the top 100 countries with suicide, Haiti is not on the list. America is number 8. You can interpret that as you like. We, the richest country in the world, have number 8 suicide rate in the world. And Haiti has nothing, but they have hope. And that hope is in Christ. That hope is the gospel. And they are talking to the world now. They are telling the world where their faith and their strength lies. And they will survive. Because God is with them. Because they let God. They need God. And that's the message of Haiti for us. That he moves among us too. As today they ask, can you help? We don't have brochures in the bulletin today. Never got around to doing that. But we will take a door offering today, not for your village, not for the, and that's, I can't describe how important that is. I think he was flashing images of some of your houses up here. I didn't see them. But if you can leave a gift, a door offering, a check, make it out to Food for the Poor, or cash. Every dime will go to Haiti. Every dime will go to Haiti to help in recovery. I do want to show you 2 things, and then I'll quit.
Go ahead and show those pictures while
Oh,
you're talking.
he didn't show them yet, huh? Oh, yeah. Some of you may have seen this before. You know, children don't eat every day. Sometimes they go as much as 3 days without eating. They'll have a stomach ache. And what the mothers can do, there's no food available. They take mud and clay and mix it together and make little crackers. And then they put it in the sun to harden. So when a child is crying because of malnutrition and hunger, they take some of this mud and clay, break this off, put a little sugar on it, a little Kool-Aid, and this is to a child. It has zero nutritional value. But it takes away the tummy ache because this is primarily calcium, same substance used in Tums and Rolaids. But this has one more thing, depending upon where they get the mud and the clay. It's called bacteria. And the very food they take to help their stomach ache can cause them death, because this will cause diarrhea. And you can't just buy a bottle of ammonium AD. There's no place to go. So about 20% of all children born in Haiti don't live to see their fifth birthday. We are a wealthy nation. I often sometimes talk to young people and say, do you know how to text? You use an iPhone. You can use a telephone. You can use all kinds of stuff. And I ask kids, how much does one of these things cost? And even for a $20 bill, you can feed 540 kids. They say, we have no money. It's bad economy, and it is by our standards. But when you take kids sometimes to Best Buy or Radio Shack, nothing to look at something, a little handheld iPhone, $349, $249. Monthly plan might be $50 a month, $30 a month. We start racking up the money. And the kids of our country, they're not eating mud and clay. They're texting and they're spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And the money is there. This congregation, you have been so generous. And you also have to be affirmed, so thank you for them. People whose names you don't know, but they want to say thank you. But right now we are taking offerings. Every dime goes to Haiti Relief. Every dime will probably be working already next week. You're going to leave a check, food for the poor, or cash, whatever it might be. Final thing, 2 weeks ago I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Now I was going to show this to folks here. There were 3 services like you have here. And after the first service, a young lady, I happen to know this lady, she was 5 years old, 4 or 5 like these little kids. But I had met her mother before the service. Her mother was the pastor's wife. And a little girl came to me and she said, I want to give money. And so the woman wanting her purse and gave her $20, said, here, give this to him. She said, no, Mama, I want to give my money. She gave me $20. But they lived in a parsonage next to the church. She went home. After the second service, this little girl was around my feet there, and she poked on me a little bit and pulled a stool. And she said, Pastor, this I want to give to the poor. Her little pouch, it had pennies and nickels and quarters in here. It's her money. She said, what I gave, that was Mama's money. That's not my money. I want to give my money. To me, that's worth $1 million. I wrote her husband, the pastor, a letter. He wrote me back, and he said, I have tears in my eyes that my daughter would do that, but she's that kind of a girl. And I just want to thank you for letting me know, because we didn't know. I'm thinking of sending her pouch back, but I don't know if I want to or not. Thank you, Pastor Short. Keep Haiti in your prayers, and they pray for you too. Thank you, and God's blessing be with you.